Hey guys, making another video today. Today is Monday, November 3rd. Today's video topic I wanted to make about was forgiveness. I thought I'd already made a video about this already, but when looking back, it seems that I didn't. And today I was reading through Matthew 18, which is mostly about forgiveness. The first thing I think I wanted to say was from my own experience. One of the biggest things about growing up that I don't think I was ready for, that no one really taught me or talked to me about, is forgiving your parents. That's definitely one of the biggest things for me that I had to kind of deal with as part of growing up. Sorry, not from like being a kid and teenager. I'm talking about when I finally moved out, basically. Because everybody's not perfect. Everybody's imperfections. And I do remember I was listening to a sermon the other day on the radio, and they were talking about this topic of parents. And one of the things that struck me was the pastor said, "Honor thy father and thy mother is a command and not a merit-based system." We're always commanded to forgive each other, not based on, oh, this person's been nice to me lately, based on a merit system. They deserve for me to forgive them for making a mistake. No, God commands us to forgive each other and to love each other, as God, Jesus Christ himself, did it to the point of death. In Matthew 18, sorry, I was not in that way, but that's where my Bible's resting, but you can't see that. In Matthew 18, it first starts off with Peter asking, "Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother if he sins against me?" And depending on the version you have, Jesus says 77 times or 70 times 7. Not illustrating a specific number, but that you should just continually forgive those brothers who sin against you. And one of the things, to be fair, that Jesus does illustrate is that if someone sins and you point out to them and they agree with you, you have won them over. If they don't go along with it, Jesus says, go and find 2 or 3 people so that you can be aligned with the law that says everything will be built on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Or I don't remember if it's 2 or 3 or at least 2 or 3, but you get the idea. And Jesus says if that person that sinned against you still does not listen when bringing 2 or 3 witnesses, take them to the church. And if they don't even listen to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. So it is, a little bit different, I suppose, if they are someone who has sinned and just unwilling to, I guess, admit their fault, even when the evidence is brought against them. But still, Jesus says we should, in our hearts, forgive them. It doesn't mean you have to, how should I put it, continue with that person in the same way you have been. You should forgive them, but you might have to, excuse me, a crack in my back because it's been hurting the way I was sitting. But you don't have to, continue to basically keep that same sort of relationship the same you had with the person beforehand. Obviously, it's situational. It's very just like with everything else, it's very situational. It's not one blanket statement covers everything. But still, regardless, even if you don't continue to be friends with that person or interact with that person, you still should forgive them in your heart and not harbor like a hatred or a grudge or whatever against that person. Because lots of times, evil will take the chance to expound upon that within your soul, sending temptations into your heart and mind to continue to give into hatred, basically, in your thoughts. Also, in Matthew 18 is the story of I don't know if the story has a specific name, but the story of the servant whose master forgave him of a great sum. Now in the story it says, one day a master had a servant who owed him a great sum of 10,000 talents. And when he went to him, say, "Where's my money? I will throw you in prison," stuff like that. The servant begged for forgiveness and asked for more time. And the master had pity on him and said, "All right, I'll forgive your debts and I will cancel it." Just as God has done with us. Because in the chapter, it says the servant owed him 10,000 talents. Depending on what version you have, it might say talents or, bags of gold or whatever. Which actually translates to, I believe it's 200,000 years of work. Because it said 1 talent is 20 years of a day laborer's wage. So 20 times 10,000 would be 200,000 years. And the master just forgave it. And then, as most of you probably know, the servant went along and found another fellow servant, who owed him a much smaller sum. I can't remember I think it was just some silver coins and a copper coin or something like that. Basically just to illustrate a much larger, much smaller sum was owed. And the first servant was unwilling to forgive his fellow servant. He went up to him, started joking him and yelling at him, "Where's my money? How do you not have my money? Why don't you have my money?" Full of rage and anger. The second servant says, "Oh, please forgive me, I'll get it, just give me more time." Of course, like the first servant said to his master, when his master was kind of ripping him for it. And the first servant wouldn't hear it and had his fellow servant thrown into prison until he could pay back what he owed. Of course, his fellow servants, it doesn't say how many, but it says fellow servants saw the interaction happen. They went and told their master about what happened. The master had the first servant brought in and said, "How could you not forgive your fellow servant after the great debt that I forgave you of? I will throw you into prison, basically, and to be tortured until you can pay back every amount that you owe." So, obviously, the story is God has forgiven us of a great debt that we do not deserve. God has reconciled us to himself through the death of Christ, his Son, and the resurrection, overcoming death itself and allowing us a way to heaven, which is salvation by grace through faith. And lots of times on this earth, you're going to come across someone who you just don't like. If it's someone you know, maybe it's just one random interaction out in public. Who knows? It could be your wife, your kids. It doesn't matter. God says, forgive, or your heavenly Father will not forgive you. It's not about merit. God doesn't say, "Oh, if they've been nice to you this week, go ahead and forgive them." No. I know you're in your feelings when someone's just really goes against you, and it may be unwarranted, unjustified, and you just feel like you're justified in your hatred towards them. But God says no. Forgive your fellow servant as I have forgiven you, and move on. It's not easy. It's not meant to be easy. But through faith and believing in the words of Christ, as Christ said, those who love me will obey my teachings. So you will forgive your fellow servants. You know, forgiveness is a very, like I was saying earlier, is a very big thing, because one of the bad things about it is it will cause you to just have hatred and bad darkness in your heart, basically. It's not so much about towards whatever specific person. It's just that you're allowing hatred to just continually reign in your heart. And we should not do that. It will definitely affect our judgment and cause us to stumble into sin, whether physically or in our heart. You know, if you want to look back at the Old Testament, it could be David forgiving Saul for trying to kill him several times. I don't remember the specific amount of times Saul tried to have David killed, but David wouldn't do it. Said Saul is David's anointed king, first king of Israel. Samuel anointed him after the people begged for a king, and David wouldn't retaliate against him. David said, no, I will not do this, even when given like the easiest opportunity to do so. There's the big, given the opportunity to do so. You will lots of times perhaps be given a very easy opportunity to get one over on someone that you just don't like. That's just part of giving into hatred and unforgiveness. There's no reason to get one over on someone. Now, God says, I will take revenge. God says, I will be the one who does that. Not you, me. God is the one who judges in the end. Yes, go and point out in love and correction someone else's wrongdoing, but do not judge and condemn them. In love and peace, forgive each other. We'll jump to the New Testament. God was willing to forgive someone like Saul, who of course was persecuting Christians, having them thrown in prison or killed. I don't believe it specifically said that he killed one of them like outright by himself, but had them thrown in prison and stuff where they would die eventually. But the road to Damascus experience, and he becomes Paul. God was willing to forgive someone like someone who was dragging away his own people and having them killed and thrown in prison and murdered. And of course, Paul became one of the apostles and greatest men who ever lived. It wasn't easy, I'll say that. One of the first things God said to Ananias before he healed Saul was, "He is my chosen instrument to the Gentiles. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name." So there wasn't an easy road ahead for Paul, but still he was forgiven and allowed a chance to redeem himself. So maybe I'll try to think of a specific situation. If your partner or spouse maybe just had a bad day and had an outburst of anger over, what they had going on, let it out on you. Most of us would think we are in our own right to, clap back at them and just rail it into them with, screaming and anger and stuff like that. And we all know that it's just not going to go well. It's only going to create further problems. And I know it's not easy to just kind of sit there calmly, to take it in, forgive them, not think much about it, and talk to them about it. Be like, hey, what's going on lately? Why are you acting like this? Could be a friend, doesn't have to be a spouse. What's going on? Are you good? This, and that. It's much, 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 much more constructive than just sitting there and yelling back at them. Obviously, all of us are going to have or will say something out of anger that we shouldn't, and lots of times can't be taken back. So, as I'm trying to illustrate, non-forgiveness can really lead to some consequences. But still, it's sin in and of itself. So we shouldn't give into it for that simple reason anyway. Forgiving your fellow believer. I was trying to think of another specific situation, but I'll just let it go with the first one. Forgiving this. I feel like I've said it's not easy several times already, but still, I'm just trying to illustrate that it's not supposed to be easy. Christ and his forgiveness of us was willing to go to death so that we could be reconciled to God. And one of the things that makes me think about that was I was actually reading the end of Matthew, and I think it was yesterday. And it just made me, just have to take a second and just, what I'm saying, shaking my head, not trying to be angry. When you read stuff like, the Roman guard took Jesus to the Roman, I can't remember what it's called, the Roman household or post, I can't remember what it's called. And one of the things they did, obviously, was they put the crown of thorns on him, slap him, punch him, put a ivory robe on him. And one of the things that just made me just kind of close my eyes and just look back in disgust is just, it says they took a stick or a pole and just beat him over the head with it. It says again and again they hit him in the head with it. I know each and every one of us would not have been able to forgive those people if we were in that situation. Christ has done everything for us. And now we are reconciled to God, and through the Spirit, we can forgive and love one another much more easily. Pray to God about those who have sinned against you. You do not have to hold it in by yourself. Maybe pray to God about how to move forward with the person. I hope that you all have a good night. Today is Monday, November 3rd. Hope you all have a good night.